So you will allow us to record so that at least we can be able to put it out on YouTube and stuff. So just for reference. So be aware that we will be recording the session. Thank you. Let me know if you can see my screen, just as a test.
Yes, I can see.
Good stuff. Thanks. Karibu Grace. I see you are trying to sneak in, but I have noticed that you've entered the room.
Hi, Victor. Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting and welcoming me.
Thanks. Probably we can start. I don't want to assume that anyone who's going to join is going to join. The invite was sent. We had around 70 registration for this session. I mean, maybe you guys are still taking their morning coffee. Probably we can just start with a round of introductions. We can start with myself. My name is Victor Otieno. I'm a recent former Chief Officer, Digital Economy and Startups at Nairobi County. I'm transitioning back to private sector as a director under Vifa Consult, which is a think tank that supports the startup ecosystem as well as the MSME ecosystem through policy work that is underpinned on research. So we work with the entire spectrum of both entrepreneurship as well as the innovation ecosystem in terms of being able to probe questions or problems that we can be able to research on that can be able to inform not only their programming in terms of interaction with entrepreneurs, but also has a very heavy leaning on policy. So yeah, so that's us. I don't see anyone from my team here, but in case you are on the Vifa team, I'll give you time to introduce yourself. So probably because we are just a few of us, maybe you can just take a minute to do an introduction as we wait for others to join. Then probably I can just start with the presentation.
Okay, I'm Frida Nchoga. I'm Digital Commerce Advisor from the Tony Blair Institute. I've joined by invitation of a colleague, Joshua Oyuro, who is our Digital IT Advisor. Unfortunately, I'll have to step out in about 15 minutes, but I'm looking forward to consume as much content as possible and contribute. Thank you.
Frida.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Grace Washori. I work with the ASPED Network of Development Entrepreneurs as a regional head for East Africa chapter, in partnership with Viva Consult to get this content out, and looking forward to just hearing your recommendations on how to engage and having a good discussion. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Alan Kakai. I'm Director for Legal and Policy Affairs at the Blockchain Association of Kenya. I'm very excited to just be part of this conversation and see how the digital assets and the blockchain space can contribute overall to such kind of conversations. Because as an association, we have a commitment to explore and find ways through which digital assets and blockchain can attract investment capital of about $1 billion into the country to fund the Kenyan budget, either through tokenization or through tax or other use cases. And that is why I'm here, very excited, and thank you for the invite, Victor.
John, or someone. John, Juma, and Moses.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning, John.
Thank you so much. Nice to see you again, Victor. I seem to also know a few people. Frida, good morning. My name is John. I'm a co-founder and a CEO of a fintech company called Chapi, where we work with CFOs to automate a lot of their finance processes. Happy to be here, and I would love to learn more. Thank you.
Very much, John. So Moses, then Karibu Ann and Marcelina. We were just doing the introduction. So probably you can just do quick introductions. If not, then probably we can just maybe shift.
Yeah, hi. Thank you. Sorry, I'm just joining. My name is Marcelina Buya. I'm the co-founder of SME Business Clinic. So I work with a number of SMEs. So I was very interested in the review to understand what this is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marceline. I see Anne Ishungwa, as well as, I think Moses. Those are the only two. Maybe probably.
Good morning, everybody. Yes, this is Anne Ishungwa. Pleasure to connect, and looking forward to learning. I am a director of a consulting firm by the name AK Advisory. We work with SME, and I'm looking forward to getting insights that I can pass on to my SMEs.
Thank you very much, Anne. Lastly, Mr. Moses. But I can see Moses is on autopilot. So I think for those who are joining, probably you can just write on the chat, maybe just an introduction of yourself and the organizations that you represent. Then, or maybe if we have time, then we can just maybe give you an opportunity. So allow me to just dive into the agenda that we set out. I think as I indicated in my introduction, my name is Victor Otieno. I'm a director at Viva Consult, which is a startup and SME research and consultancy or think tank, or whichever way you may want to call it. We over the last decade have been very active around policy conversations for both SMEs as well as startups. So we've done and continue to do to put out content or research papers, be it journals or just typical policy advice to be able to, that can be able to inform and move the ecosystem forward. So as part of our work is we wanted to do a review of the budget policy statement, which ideally is a document that is produced by the National Treasury as part of the budget making process. And our special focus around this particular document is on MSMEs and startups. So you'll notice that if you are to analyze the entire policy document, it cuts across. So our focus ideally for now is just startups and SMEs. So in terms of background, just to give us context, I'm sure you know this, and this is just for the record, is Section 25 of the PFM Act 2012 provides that the National Treasury shall submit the budget policy statement for approval to Cabinet, which then goes to the National Assembly for approval by the 15th of February. So the reason why we did the analysis is, of course, the public participation window had lapsed, but again, it doesn't mean that we cannot be able to make a submission around the same. So I believe this year's budget policy statement is going to be tabled in National Assembly by the 15th of February. Sometimes, depending with the year, maybe the election year, the budget policy statement is submitted maybe a month or two before. So again, because this is a normal financial year, we assume that this is going to happen by the 15th of February, and the Parliament then will be able to consider the budget policy statement either as is, or they can be able to add, amendments in terms of input. And this is where we hope that that becomes our window that informs the budget policy statement. What we see in Kenya over the years is a lot of us within the entrepreneurship ecosystem always wait for the tail end of the process in terms of budget reading, and maybe start giving our opinions or recommendations then. Usually by then the process is so far ahead that it's very difficult for any changes or any meaningful changes to take place. So we believe and hope that through this process, we can be able to, and through our analysis and of course, feedback from the ecosystem, then we can be able to have some recommendations go through before it is passed in February. So we, as WIFA, decided to work, as we always do, with the entire ecosystem. And we know, of course, we've heard from the introduction to different associations that are represented here. So we reached out to a lot of, or if not all, major associations. Digital Financial Lenders Association, Kayana, which is focused on women, ASEC, which is looking at incubators within Nairobi, countrywide innovation hubs, which is representative hubs across the country, Kenya National Federation of Juakali Associations, also looking at the Juakali sector, Moringa School, because there's an aspect of capacity building, Blockchain Association, as has been introduced by Kaikai, as well as Andy. So the idea is for us to be able to expand and get the views of the entire spectrum of both the SME as well as the startup ecosystem. Just for information, the budget policy statement is a strategic document that government uses and puts out indicating the strategies that they have towards the economy in terms of programs, both to different sectors, again, for them to be able to catalyze socioeconomic development within the country, or for most of us, we just call it GDP. So this budget policy statement is the second under the current Kenya Kwanza administration, who are going under the theme of bottom-up economic transformation agenda. I'm a bottom-up, whichever way you'd want to look at it, which is different from the Big Four agenda that was under the previous administration. So this is the second, the budget policy statement. What we did is, in our analysis, and we might not be able to present this here because we have a bigger document, is we've been able to cross-check the budget policy statement all the way from 2021. So the temptation usually when you're analyzing budget policy statement is to just look at 1 year. Then you miss out on maybe opportunities, challenges from previous years. So for us to be able to get a very good cross-section is we were able to go through the budget policy statements of 2021, 2022, up to this current one of 2024. Because if you look at the way government runs, is we still are running under Vision 2030. And over the years, we've had different medium-term plans from MTP1 up to 3. And this administration is squarely under MTP4, which I think is themed under the BETA or Bottom-up Economic Transformation Agenda. So, so of course, from the BPS, we see that the government has indicated that the policy statement has been prepared on the background of some challenges, the Israel and Palestinian war, the Russian Ukraine war, a lot of happenings that are happening at a macro level, which we also take cognizant of, and other governments are also going through the same. So in terms of focus or priority, the BPS has 5 key priorities. We have agriculture, we have MSMEs, we have housing and settlement, healthcare, and digital superhighway and creative industry. So our analysis has only focused on 2 areas, although we've tried to analyze the rest, especially agriculture. But our focus has been on MSMEs as well as the digital superhighway and creative industry, where it is assumed that we assume that that's where the innovation ecosystem lies. So currently in Kenya, we don't have a startup law or an innovation law. So we have multiple legislations that support ICT generally, but we don't have a clear-cut law around, let's say, for example, startups. So what we did is we are using that, we are leveraging on that theme to see if we can be able to have, to analyze if the strategies that have been put forth can be able to, or is feasible enough to support the innovation ecosystem. So again, in terms of value chains, under the bottom-up economic transformation, there has been a focus on the 9 value chains that we've seen. And we've seen now, after the identification of these value chains, now there are strategies that they have proposed or government has proposed around these value chains. And I think one of them being the county aggregation centers that would operate within the counties. Again, it's very good to have proposals, but again, for us is how do you make these things work? So it's just not, just saying and declaring that this is what we want to do, but are the strategies that you're putting forth bankable? So for us, it's not a question of how much money you allocate; it's the feasibility of the plan, or this, the feasibility and bankability of the plans around the same. Are they feasible? If in 2023, if you say the same thing, what have you done between last year and this year? And possibly, if you're to look at a previous administration, what lessons have you been able to carry forward towards the 2 budget policy statements? Again, why we say this is because there are lessons, even as much as in the previous administration had strategies that didn't work, there are things that also worked. So we want to ensure that also the things that worked in the previous administration or in MTP3 are carried forth. So those are questions that we are really asking ourselves. So of course, if you look at Kenya generally over the past decade, has grown significantly on average at 5%. But again, if you were to analyze that, you see that that was highly driven by infrastructure development, the SGR, the expressway, and the likes. So the thing with GDP doesn't really give you a real measure of, or a real sense of how the economy is performing. So if you were to compare Kenya to other emerging countries such as India and Bangladesh, we are still way behind. And the GDP growth is not attributed to activities within the real economy, but it's actually based on government spending. So, and that was the previous administration. This administration has put, an agenda of focusing on the real economy, and we've seen the different pillars that they are focused on. So our question, or the critique or the analysis that we are doing is, we just want to see if that's feasible. So in 2022, GDP growth was projected at 4.8%, and it's estimated to grow at 5%, supported by agriculture and the service sector. So you realize that agriculture is a big contributor towards GDP growth in Kenya. Around 40% of GDP in total, around 25% directly, then another 20-something indirectly. So agriculture becomes a major player within the economy. Almost 70% of of industry or manufacturing is agro-processing, which means that the success of manufacturing sector is underpinned on the good performance of the agricultural sector. So manufacturing has still continued to underperform, both in the previous administration as this. There was a big focus on manufacturing and ensuring that manufacturing reaches around 15% of GDP in the previous administration. Again, it has continued to weaken and perform suboptimally. So some of the challenges that they face, which we hope will be addressed within this budget policy statement, is increased production cost, which is looking at input cost and cost of borrowing. So even as we are looking at the BPS, cost of borrowing is a factor of many things. It could be a factor of government borrowing locally, so which means they crowd out local players, and it means that they are not able to access financing. It could be the dollar against the shilling is becoming stronger. A manufacturer is able to access dollars, which has a bearing on the input cost. So of course, a weakened shilling also has a bearing on manufacturing. Heightened political tension has a direct correlation, and we've seen this over the years, on the performance of the manufacturing sector, issues to do with foreign currency, and of course, a slowed global economy. There are factors that are within the control of government, some are not. So the question we pose is, for those factors that are within the control of government, is there a way in which they can be able to mitigate and ensure that the manufacturing sector, which is a key sector, is able to grow? So again, just based on World Bank projections, World Bank is projecting a GDP of between 4.5 to 5.2% in 2024, which is not far off from what the BPS has proposed in terms of 5%. But again, this is just a projection. We need to be able to institute real measures to ensure that that this GDP growth is actually felt by supporting real industries within the economy. So what we've done is this is a very highly summarized presentation. So we are hoping that based on this, it can give you food for thought, or some meat for you to go back maybe in the next couple of days, for you to come up with added suggestions or propositions or proposals or recommendations around the sectors that you represent. So you see that the audience that we are looking out for is everyone within the SME as well as the innovation ecosystem. So based on the themes that has been proposed within the budget policy statement, then probably you can be able to give suggestions. We'll collate that into a document, then submit that to either the sector committee that is looking at the budget policy statement within National Assembly, as well as give a copy to National Treasury, so that again, we can be able to have our ideas and thoughts and recommendations taken into consideration. So the budget policy statement asserts that the economy is going to rebound, both in the short term as well as in the medium term. And within the MSME space, they are banking on the affirmative action, not the affirmative action fund, but the Hustler Fund. And they're saying that that is a major intervention towards the SME sector. So we are pushing back and just asking, if that is feasible, or if this is something that can be able to sustain the entire SME spectrum. So of course, I'm sure all of us have, recommendations around the same. So around SMEs, and just looking at the budget policy statement, and again, what we did is we analyzed both the 2024, 2023, and up to 2021 budget policy statement. So the 2024 budget policy statement, of course, has given a very huge focus on the Hustler Fund, saying they've disbursed over, 20 million in terms of 20, I think they've disbursed, they have savings of around 2.3 billion in terms of saving. They have benefited of over 20 million in terms of customers. They have a repayment of over 73%, which it is reported that is impressive. They've launched a new group product that is looking at chamas and the likes, and they have been able to disperse 151 million. Just a quick math. Usually when you throw numbers, it's always good to give context. So if you are to look at the Chama or the group lending, in as much as they have disbursed 151 million for 20,000 groups, that's an average of 7,500 on average per group. So the question would be, is this enough to be able to support or catalyze significant growth within the MSME space if you're to give a group 7,500, whether they are doing a car wash or doing a wines and spirit or selling clothes? The question is, is this significant enough to really make an impact or move the needle? So that's a question. That's a question that we would pose. So around the same, we are asking is this model the best in terms of really supporting SMEs? Given that we know that over 70% of SMEs operate within wholesale retail. And what this means is that over the years, we've seen SMEs suffer whenever there is a systemic shock. So whether it is a shock to the ecosystem through an election or through an unfortunate incident or a phenomenon such as COVID, the first sector that usually suffers is the SME, because a majority of them are informal and a majority of them are within wholesale retail. So these sectors are highly susceptible to systemic shocks. And what the Hustler Fund does is it just reaffirms or just leaves you within that rat race. Because again, competitive barriers to entry and exit towards wholesale and retail are very low. So it means that the Hustler Fund, what in effect it's doing, it is almost like a cash flow financing. Does it remove our SMEs from the rat race? Probably not. So that then has to be reviewed. Looking at previous BPS, we see other access to finance initiatives that were instituted. We have the credit guarantee scheme. We have the Movable Property Securities Act, which ideally was to allow SMEs to be able to use the typical assets that they have as collateral. So whether you have a fridge, whether you have a television, I don't know, something that is not land. So maybe a majority don't have land, which we feel is an initiative or initiatives that needs to be pursued together with Hustler Fund. We're not saying stop Hustler Fund, yet it is addressing a certain issue, which we agree. But if you have to look at the entire spectrum of SMEs, the 7.4 million of them, this particular intervention by itself alone is not addressing the full spectrum. So there is a need of review or reporting of saying we stopped affirmative action funds, the Biashara Fund, Women Fund, and the likes. And we are now focusing on Hustler Fund because we have improved on 1, 2, 3. If that is what has been proposed, then probably again that a report around the same issue around crowding out of private sector or SMEs because of local borrowing by government is an issue that also has to be concretely addressed. We can say we want to give support to SMEs through financing. Yes, government can give, but we also need private sector to be able to lend to SMEs. And the action of government through local lending has a direct bearing or negative bearing on SME lending. Again, that's something that we feel has to be addressed. The second issue or proposal around SMEs is market access. Again, what we've tried to is to rework the BPS so that it's easier based on the themes that we understand. So BPS has indicated various interventions around market access. So we had the Ministry of Investment through former CS Moses Kuria, who had initiated this, is the county aggregation industrial parks. So each county is espoused to have an aggregation center of sorts based on their strength or competitive advantage. So the assumption is that maybe an industrial park in Kisumu would focus on fish value chain. But if you're to compare with the identified value chains, that the 9 value chains that we had indicated, there is no link. So on one hand, we see the budget policy statement that they are saying that we are going to establish county aggregation centers. It's also saying that they are going to have CIDC centers. They're also saying that we are going to have incubation centers of sorts within or industrial centers within TVETs. So all these are alluding to creation of a market of sorts, but it's still not making sense. What makes sense is, you know, and we've seen this with other nations, China, Vietnam, and the likes, is a very clear link between access to market, which is identified. So what we maybe expect is, if it's within the rice value chain, where is that market? Is it the East African market? Is it in the CFTA market? Is it through AGOA? I mean, a clear identification of this market linked to a certain aggregation center, so that it's very clear that we are not just building, you know, additional infrastructures, but it's clearly linked with certain markets. And how are these spaces interlinked? So how is CIDC linked with KIPES? How is KIPES linked with the TVETs or the industrial parks within the TVET institutions? That is not very clear. So we need to be able, it has to be very clear, and we need to see a response around the same. We have other market opportunities that we've seen through the different MTPs. We have, for instance, the AGPO, which is the access to government procurement opportunities for the youth and women. Is that working? We've not seen a report around the same, and this is something that previous government have invested a lot of resources around the same. So it's the prerogative of government to be able to say, yes, we are moving in this direction, and this is why we are moving, and we feel that these are the reasons why we feel this one wasn't working. So that when you are moving forward, we can be able to judge in an objective manner, saying, yes, this strategy makes sense, as opposed to what the previous government or even if it's a pivot from, we tried this, it didn't work. So in this MTP, we are trying to do something different. Policy and regulation is also a major issues. Of course, we have literature review around the same. The last review by government, of course, is the MSME report in 2016. So if you are to look at the BPS 2023, there are certain promises, or there are certain things that the government had indicated that it would address, you know, end criminalization of work by enacting rights to work law, trading license, etc. You know, government will work with county governments to provide one-street trading premises, you know, and support the informal sector. They would review the, you know, regressive taxation as well as bureaucracy, regulated compliance, etc. So it's very clear what they said, and this is just we just picked this from the 2023 BPS. So the question is, what we've seen is, on the new budget policy statement, it is silent on these three issues. So the question we are saying, or the question we're asking is, can we be able to get a report on this? Because we are seeing a focus on other things. There is the issue, of course, around taxation that is happening or taking place currently around e-teams and, you know, compliance, etc., which might to some degree go against the ease of doing business that had been proposed in the previous budget policy statement. So again, even the previous government, which was pursuing the ease of doing business through the World Bank Index, had made significant strides, you know, with issues around small courts, which was courts that would focus on SMEs. That is quite silent. There were issues around, you know, ensuring that it's easier for you to register a business, which again, through significant progress had been made around the same. So are we saying that they are abandoning ease of doing business in totality? And if they are saying that, then probably what new measures are you putting to ensure that the cost of doing business, so it's just generally the cost of doing business and the effectiveness or efficiency of someone running their business in Kenya is easy. So that is something that they're very silent on. We've seen, of course, Nairobi County launch the Unified Business Permit, which is, I think, is a great start, and we would hope that all counties would adopt the same, so that you know, it's easier for SMEs as well as startups to be able to register business. There has been the perennial issues of cess, which is the tax that is which targets, you know, agriculture as well as construction materials. cess has, and again, there's literature review to support this, is really making doing business in Kenya very difficult, and is making us uncompetitive. So if, say for example, VFAS decides to start a business around manufacturing, if you are to move our agricultural produce, let's say, for example, in the agricultural value chain, if you are to move our product maybe from Makueni to Nairobi, what CES does is you'll get CES charged for every county, and the formula is different. So we need this to be addressed because it has a cross-cutting effect and a ripple effect on the competitive of businesses. Again, we have a report status on the small claims court, which I think a significant progress had been made so that it makes it easier for SMEs to be able to solve their disputes without going through the unending process of going through normal courts. So other programs that we want to see is capacity building that is linked to market. So we are not just, we don't want just to see capacity building for the sake of it. Is there a link between market, the KIPES or whichever aggregation center, and capacity building to ensure that our entrepreneurs are able to have the necessary capacity for them to be able to access those markets as well as run their businesses. But capacity building cannot be an end by itself. It has to be linked with, it has to be within a bigger program and a bigger intervention. Like I indicated, the last report that we had around significant report that we had for SMEs and as well as for startups, which we don't have, was in 2016. So the question is, which data are we using or is government using to be able to prescribe interventions towards the MSME ecosystem? We still rely on the 7.4 million SMEs in terms of population, which is 2016 data. I'm sure that number has increased. We still are saying over 70% are informal and the likes. So we need to see a serious data collection program to ensure that not only do we update our the data that we use for both startups as well as SMEs, not only for government use, but also for private sector use in terms of interventions. So that's a general summary around SMEs. From a startup perspective, the approach that we took was different. Number one is startups specifically are not mentioned within the budget policy statement and the entire framework within government. And of course, we've continued to work with the different stakeholders around the startup bill and just seeing how we can be able to have legislation that supports the innovation ecosystem. Having said that, we still have a theme called Digital Superhighway, which is espoused to support the innovation ecosystem. So the approach that we took is looking at different organizations that have prescribed a way of supporting the innovation ecosystem. We have the Science, Technology and Innovation Strategy for Africa, which is under AU, has given a prescription of how to support the innovation ecosystem. We have different indices that ranks Kenya around innovation. So we have the Global Innovation Index, we have the Startup Ecosystem Index. So what we're saying is we are looking at those indices, looking at the parameters that they're using to measure the performance of an ecosystem, of an innovation ecosystem, and saying, can we be able to marry the two so that we just don't focus on the digital superhighway as the only enabler to innovation, but can we be able to explore how we can be able to look at these parameters? And of course, in addition to that, we are looking at getting feedback from the different aspects or different faculties within the innovation ecosystem, be it within blockchain, be it within incubators, whether it is startups, the entire spectrum of the innovation ecosystem to ensure that we are able to get proposals that make sense. So maybe just to show you in terms of a nutshell, is we did a comparison of the three major, and of course we can get others. It doesn't mean these are exhaustive. Is we're looking at the Global Innovation Index, Startup Ecosystem Index, and the Science, the STISA, which is under AU. All of them have mentioned human capital and research as a key parameter for supporting the digital or the innovation ecosystem. And they have gone ahead and given almost like very granular items of what the government needs to focus on. So again, this is the entire spectrum. You can look at capacity within blockchain. You can look at capacity within this, life sciences. You can look at capacity around coding, etc. But again, under the BPS, we need to be able to see a very specific focus on human capital development. It doesn't mean that that this has to be in terms of allocation of resources. It could be a deliberate move by partnering with private sector. Maybe it could be a partnership with Moringa. It could be a partnership with JQuat. I mean, we just need to see that very clear under the BPS, because we know that's a parameter that is very important for the ecosystem. Infrastructure is also something that has been mentioned. Under the Global Innovation Index, there is a clear focus on electricity output as an infrastructure. What we see from the BPS, we've seen, saying that we are going to put 25,000 hotspots. We are focusing on the fiber optic backbone, which is fantastic. But the thing is, what we are saying is, can we be able to expand that scope? Looking at maybe Startup Ecosystem Index, there's a focus. What they're measuring is the number of co-working spaces, number of accelerators. It doesn't mean that government needs to go and open these spaces. We already have the G2M programs. How are they run? Are they running as co-working spaces? Are they working as accelerators? Can we be able to retrofit some of the spaces that are there to be able to address this matter? From a STISA perspective, it's a question of focusing on life sciences. Can we have very specialized labs around, say, for example, vaccines, etc. Again, they don't have to cover it. Maybe either it could be through PPPs, it could be through, they can be able to stagger this and say, okay, we mentioned this, maybe then, do it next year, etc. Business environment is also another commonality. We need to look at, and business environment based on the different parameters. It could be looking at the tax environment, but also it could just be looking at the entire ecosystem. So, for instance, looking at the Startup Ecosystem Index, we're looking at ease of doing business and registering a company, internet speed, internet freedom, R&D investment. Again, it's just a question of looking at these parameters and saying, which one can we tackle now? Who within the innovation ecosystem can help us or aid us, leapfrog ourselves around that parameter. Stakeholder collaboration, government has to take lead, and we've seen, we have, your triple helix theories where, which supposes or proposes that for entrepreneurs to succeed, different players have to come together, led by government, bringing academia, bringing private sector, to ensure that the entrepreneur, be it whether it's an SME or a startup, is able to succeed. And all these indices indicate that there has to be a focus on collaboration. So specifically, the Global Innovation Index looks at innovation linkages between university, industry, and R&D, looking at IP or intellectual property. Again, this is not very prescriptive, but should be able to give us or give government an indication of areas that they need to focus on. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's a high-level summary of what we have so far. What we are doing is we have a bigger report that we are working on, which we were able to extract a very high summary of the same. So hopefully this gives you an idea of what we want to submit. Possibly, maybe if we don't have too much time, maybe we can take maybe 1 or 2 questions or observations, etc. Then probably you can be able to share detailed, or if you have any extra recommendations around both what we've shared, then we can be able to just collate that and make the submission probably before end of the month, because as I indicated at the beginning, the BPS is going to be submitted by 15th of February. So we want to have our submission way before then, so that in case of any back and forth, we can be able to address them, address that in good time. I'll put my email on the chat. So probably if you have time, you can be able to just review that, and we can be able to review that, and probably can be able to give feedback. So you can, it's open for questions, and probably within the next 15 minutes, so that we respect time, and allow you to proceed on other matters that I'm sure are pressing. Alan?
Hi, I have a quick question to you. And I think this is when I look at SMEs and MSMEs and how they need to prepare for, a lot of tax measures that are coming in terms of compliance, in terms of adherence to laws, in terms of just being aware of what is expected of them. I wonder what is happening in the perspective of capacity building, in the perspective of number two, tools to help them apply and help them be better at accounting and become better at compliance and reporting and planning. And number three, when it comes to preparing them for future shocks that you mentioned on political issues, it could be economical, supply chain issues that exist across the world. It could be FX issues, things that are not in their control. Maybe those would be my my questions, and how we can maybe somebody within the wider team who has experienced this could help us. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, John. Around preparing for compliance, like I said, my approach or my way of thinking around compliance is a question. I always say is the level of compliance is a byproduct of support. So the proposition that we are saying is, can we be able to focus on not just compliance, but how do you support SMEs grow from a market perspective? Then plug in, capacity building and all this other stuff, later. Because again, looking at the tax base currently, and we've seen government struggle with this, is the sector, the private sector, and the formalized sector is bearing the greatest burden in terms of contribution towards the exchequer. So there is a focus on taxation or expanding the tax base as an end by itself, without looking at how do you grow this, how do you fatten this cow, for lack of a better word, so that you're able to get a bigger share of tax. So what is happening is we continue to remain a gray economy, meaning that a lot of folks still remain informal because, number one, the cost of compliance is high. So then the question is, can we be able to design programs that will allow, let's say, for example, under KIPES, if, say, for example, we would go to a certain country, whether it is Ghana or it is Nigeria, and identify, or even the US, and identify a certain value chain that we can be able to come back, set up an aggregation center that allows these people to be able to get extra income or get significantly more income. What happens then, even though they're not capacitated enough, the moment you bring that market, you can be able to, compliance becomes a very easy issue. As opposed to just pursuing, doing VAT or doing a minimum tax across board without looking at the profitability of a business. Say, for example, the challenges around turnover tax, which is, we are saying 3% of gross sales. Yeah, how would you know that, why would, if you are to tax 3% of my gross sales and I'm making losses, are you really helping me or are you not helping me? So I understand what you're saying, but I think for me, the bigger picture would be, how do we support generally small businesses to access market? Then after that, then how do we now build capacity, whether it's compliance, how to comply, how to apply for loan, how to set up your books, etc. I feel that is an easier way because even as we started VIFA way back around 2012, we started off doing offering tax and accounting work. A lot of people are like, we don't need that. I mean, we need revenue. Then once I get revenue, I'll have enough money to pay you as an accountant or as an auditor, so that I can be able to comply. But otherwise, compliance is not something that is top of mind. Guys are just trying to survive. So that's why we say, let's push possibly having good markets, having a system that allows more people to get into sustainable businesses, so that then we can be able to do compliance. Like I said, if you look at Kenya, we are 70% wholesale retail. The profit margins are razor thin. 90% of SMEs are less than 500,000 annually. If you look at that and look at the competitive market, you don't have a wiggle room, a headroom for you to be able to add any additional cost, be it tax or be it any other thing that does not have a direct bearing with the bottom line. So that's why you find that unless we sort the root cause, then these other issues will continue to remain as a challenge.
Thanks, Victor, for the feedback. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, so I've seen Grace saying, consideration for SMEs to access local capital markets. How can that be structured? I think there is the GEMS segment within the Nairobi Stock Exchange, which has been struggling. I think they had a listing this last year, towards the end of last year. I think that's something that also needs to be considered. I think that's very important because we have the NSE Stock Exchange. They have a GEMS section which has, we've not seen a report around the same in terms of how is it performing in terms of financial inclusion. So thanks so much, Grace, for that. That is duly noted.
Yeah, just to add, Victor, on that, I think I recently saw something in relation to securitization of movable properties, I think under BRS. I think this is exciting.
Yeah, that if on my question, I mentioned that in terms of not only that, but also looking at the credit guarantee scheme. So in the previous regime, there was a very big focus on, and especially after COVID, during COVID and after COVID, of banks offering a credit guarantee scheme. It didn't perform as well, but I mean, there are lessons that we can learn from both that as well as the Movable Property Securities Act, which you're terming as a securitization of movable assets. So I think if there is a report around the same in terms of how are they looking at that, as well as affirmative action funds. Remember, we still have the Women Fund, Youth Fund, which was being consolidated under Biashara Fund. So those affirmative action funds, have they been closed? Have they been consolidated? How is because ultimately those are resources. How are they related to the Hustler Fund as well as the securitization of immovable assets? So a report around the same would help us assess whether moving forward, going with Hustler Fund as the only option is the best way, or do we need to review and say we can do the Hustler Fund as one product and have the different other interventions move as is, so that we are able to address the entire spectrum in terms of SMEs. I can see we are at 10:54. I'm hoping that we can be able to close by 11. Maybe we can just get maybe one or two quickly, then we can just wrap it up. Again, like I said, you can be able to share. I've shared my email. You can be able to share your feedback probably by mid next week, so that we can consolidate and just make the submission in good time.
Yeah, Victor, hi, good morning once again. My question, I don't know if it relates to the budget or basically, there's a very huge over-reliance on tax as the primary revenue. And of course, you pointed out domestic borrowing. Is there a way as Kenyans we can innovate alternative revenue streams for government so that we're not in a position where government each year is overtaxing and overtaxing and overtaxing SMEs? I mean, I saw late last year, they took the privatization path where they were trying to privatize ICC and a few other entities. And I'm asking this because I'm doing BK, or rather, we're doing a policy paper on tokenization, on the potential for tokenization as an alternative revenue for government. Here we're talking about tokenization of, for instance, the affordable housing scheme. Instead of taxing Kenyans in order to raise money for affordable housing, you can as well tokenize it and raise money from secondary markets, tokenization of government infrastructure and tokenization of bonds and all that. So in this response or in this policy paper, is there a way somebody can make an argument that, look, it's high time we stop overtaxing Kenyans and looking at tax as the only revenue stream? Let's innovate, and as a government, let's develop ways through which government can generate alternative sources of revenue so that we do not tax out small businesses. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much, Alan. I think the reason why we called this particular session was to be able to not only explore the BPS, but also broader issues that might not be addressed within BPS, but possibly can be addressed in the next, either through MTPs in terms of a focus on that, and trying to explore how we can be able to, say, for example, look at alternative revenue raising measures. And I think what we hope is we can be able to get areas or policy areas that needs to be explored, and jointly we can be able to explore. Say, for example, the issue around tokenization is a big issue, but we have a capacity gap or capacity challenge with you as Blockchain Association of Kenya and the person who eventually does or writes policy. So I believe, working together as a network of networks of associations and organizations, we can be able to chart that path forward. So let's say, for example, can we be able to have a specific session just looking at the policy paper that we have around tokenization? Do we have case studies of whether emerging market or developed markets that have done the same? Can we be able to meet, and I think you've already done this, can we be able to meet different committees within, whether it is county assembly or national assembly or even Senate, and have just capacity building around the same? Because I feel that's a deeper issue that, it seems from a blockchain perspective, it's a very easy A to Z. But for the common mwananchi, such as myself or common novices, I'm still not able to, I'm not able to grasp that. So I think that if we are to start that journey today, by the time BPS 2025 is being drafted, we already have significant ground, significant understanding, and we can be able to find a practical way in which we can be able to have it within the budget making process. So that's the approach that I would take, and probably, of course, we'll reach out to you, the different associations, different organizations, with very specific areas that maybe are not addressed within BPS, but there are many policy documents that are coming out from government, which we can all critique and just be able to lend our thoughts around the same. So yeah, so that would be my approach to that. Specifically for this, maybe not. Because already, of course, in terms of revenue, is a question of either expanding tax base or selling, or spinning off some parastatals, or I don't know, investing in projects that can be able to give significant returns in terms of GDP contribution. So I think right now we are limited around the same, and we are saying, let's say, for example, whether it's SMEs or startups, is kindly give incentives that allows these sectors to grow so that we can be able to tax them higher rather than just taxing before they start. So that would be my response around the same. Again, we'll reach out. You can reach out to us. We are very much willing to share knowledge, collaborate, and ensure that different associations are able to work with each other. I've been fortunate enough to have founded an association. I've been within different associations for a long time. So what I see is, and of course my experience, my short experience in government in 1 year has taught me that we need to see an aggregation of the smaller associations in terms of voice for us to be heard. Otherwise, if you go to blockchain, if you go to DivSac, all of us are in the innovation ecosystem. We are trying to address government, but from different voices. If we are to consolidate our issues into one paper and say, okay, now as blockchain, these are our issues, as DivSac, these are our issues, our incubators, these are our issues, as one paper and present as one, you stand a better chance of getting legislation passed, as opposed to us going through different channels based on, based on our strength. So we can be able to use strengths of numbers. And I think as VIFA, that's our area in terms of you can focus on running your association and running your issues, but then we can help just bring together all these issues into a coherent policy movement that allows both ecosystems from an SME as well as from an innovation perspective to move forward. So I think it's 11:01. Out of respect for your time, and I'm sure it's Friday. In high school, we used to call it Members' Day. So I would beg that we close the session there. So again, just a big thank you for all of you for making time. As I indicated, kindly reach out on email or on WhatsApp or whichever way you would want to reach out and give your feedback. Probably we can just incorporate that in the next couple of days before we make our final submissions. So thank you very much for availing yourself, and have yourselves a good day ahead and a good weekend.
Thank you, Victor.
Asante.